going on, everybody? This is Moose and Brian here from OccupyFantasy.com at OccupyFantasy on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I'm your host, Moose, at CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. Co-founder and data guru here at OccupyFantasy.com. Alongside here with Brian at BrianJesterFF on Twitter. Co-founder and CEO of Occupy Fantasy. How's it going, Brian?
Moose, what's up, man? What's going on? Happy week 14. Big UFC slate tonight, so busy Saturday for us.
Yeah, I've been up since like 8 a.m. just doing it's everything that I possibly could. Made time to get a fancy background though. Thank you. Shout out Discord. The Discord mascot, which I always forget his name. Has I guess some hot cocoa over there on the side. Brian, you're not cool enough to have access to this.
I mean, I gotta have the background yak. Yes. The yak round.
The yak round. I love it. So we're here talking about the week 14 of NFL DFS. Daily plug is up on the site. We're here till about 2:30 or so. So if you have questions, now's the time to ask. But we can just jump right into it, Brian. I think we all agree this week is kind of challenging.
Yeah, that's a nice way of saying it. I was gonna say trash. The game stacks are really tough. There are some clear plays at running back, but it's really what it comes down to is how bad the game environments are, right? We obviously have, you see Tyreek Hill on screen here with a total of 53.5 in the Buffalo and Tampa Bay game, but this Kansas City game's dropped all the way down to 48.5. No other game is above 50 aside from Buffalo, Tampa. A bunch of games in like that 42, 43 point range. So it makes things really challenging. And, unlike last week, not a real clear way to play it this week.
Yeah, I literally have 3 different slate groups in the lineup builder with 3 completely different ways of playing it. I absolutely hate it. I'm just going to have to pick one and just roll with it. But yeah, it's very challenging. And the first question of the stream here from Hawk Dark is, what's your thoughts on Trevo for high risk?
I mean, if we're considering Laquan Trevo, right, that's all shows how gross this slate is. Trevo was pretty popular last week in low risk contests because he was coming off an 8-target game, just out of nowhere, started getting reps in that wide receiver room for Jacksonville. Came back last week with 5 targets, and he's gonna be on the field probably in most of the passing sets for this offense. I'm not a huge fan of it, right? The whole organization's in disarray after the reports this morning. I think there are much better, cheaper plays. I would rather play a cheap play from a game or a team that actually has a chance of scoring more than 10 points. So, I mean, I get it, but there's really no ceiling there.
Makes sense to me. So we can just jump right into it. We talked about some totals and other stuff like that. Let's talk about some of the stacks. And Brian, you even mentioned that you might be playing some 2x1 stacks this week.
Yeah, so again, we're trying to be flexible here, right? Not be super rigid 3x1s all the time. And there are two factors this week that make me more inclined to play 2x1 stacks than my traditional 3x1 stacks. One is the Kansas City Las Vegas game, the Buffalo Tampa Bay game, extremely expensive, right? I mean, we already gotten questions in the Discord, and if you just go try to make a lineup yourself, try to build a 3x1, super challenging, right? You can't really make a good lineup outside of the stack if you do that. So I think for those expensive stacks, you can go 2x1. And then some of these other games with lower totals, right? No other game above 50. A 2x1 can certainly get there if a team, puts up 24 points and the production is concentrated. So to me, the fact that we have lower total games, the fact that we have higher total games that are just ridiculously expensive, I think it leads us up to more 2x1s. And you and I were talking before the show that the new feature in the builder that lets you do a min-max of players per team in stacks, I think is super helpful in showing what the capabilities are this week.
Yeah, so I actually have a couple different stacks than what's written up in the plug. And how I'm starting out is in the stack section. I'm doing min 2, max 3 players from one team, min 0, max 1 players from the opposing team. And I'm getting the original results. So let's say, KC Raiders is one of the stacks that I am playing in one of my slate groups, and it's saying, 60% of your Raider stacks are 3x1s. It's like, all right, well, let me look at these 3x1s, and I'm like, all right, maybe I probably shouldn't have 60%. Maybe let's bump it down to 50 and let's see where it's going from there. So I love that feature in the builder. And you can pull up the card view after the lineups are made. Very easily see all your lineups for a particular team. But yeah, if you're building multiple lineups, I would definitely fool around with that. Just see what it gives you. You can always change it back later. So Questions here from Dot Best is how are you treating the San Francisco Detroit backfields?
So let's start with San Francisco. Elijah Mitchell been ruled out, and we get Jeff Wilson week again. We know it went poorly the last time. The dude had tons of touches in that game against Jacksonville. Wide open touchdown. Jimmy G threw it somehow 30 yards over his head on the 2-yard line, and we were all pretty disappointed. Now we get him again this week, but it's not a lock button spot just because JaMychal Hasty's back. In that first game, it was literally just Jeff Wilson, and he got all the work, right? JaMychal Hasty will take some work. He will take some passing work. But a lot of the comments from the coaching and the beat reporters are saying that this is Jeff Wilson's backfield. So I think you have to play him pretty heavily at 4,400 on DraftKings in a game environment that we like. Honestly, in a better rushing matchup this week than when he was against Jacksonville. So I think Jeff Wilson's a great play. I'll have heavy exposure to him in all contest types. As for the Detroit backfield, right, we have Godwin, Ikwebuke, and Jamar Jefferson, which, I mean, we're right back to preseason slates talking about these guys because these were guys we literally talked about during preseason slates for Detroit because Jamal Williams is out, DeAndre Swift is out. And, you know, it's kind of tough to pinpoint how they'll handle that backfield split, right? We saw Godwin last week run like 20-something pass routes instead of Jamal Williams. So we'd have to assume he's the passing down back, and in a game where they're 10-point underdogs, 11-point underdogs, we'd expect him to get more work. But Jamar Jefferson's pretty good too, and they could split early down work. We really don't know how it's going to pan out, but I guess long story short, Moose, there's a team total of 15 points that's going to have a split backfield. You know, on the surface it sounds good, but if you just look and just think about it from a high level, it's probably not a great idea to play either one of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why they're that high up in the model is because they are 4,000. They're putting into a role. They're pretty much the same OF index in the model. I'm not putting either one of them in my player pool. But I will say, Brian, going back to San Francisco, I think that might be my favorite stack of the week.
San Francisco and Cincy, and
I'm sure not even from the Cincinnati side, like not even from a Fanalytics side, like purely from looking at the model. I don't even like the Cincinnati side at this game. But if you take a look, you do have Jimmy G, who's like not bad, not great, middle of the pack. Team total 24.5, top 6 team total, something like that. You talked about the running back situation with Jeff Wilson. That could be your cheap piece. You have Deebo Samuel, who's the number 1 ranked wide receiver in the model on DraftKings, number 2 on FanDuel, OF Index. Tight end, you have George Kittle, who's number 2 on both DraftKings and FanDuel. And then if you wanted to run it back, you do have Joe Mixon's a top 10 running back in the model. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, both up there in the model as well. I think there's just too many pieces that can easily be fit in either a 2-1, 2x0, 3x0. It's a very flexible side of a game stack, I think. Every time I look and try and fool around with it, it ends up somehow I'm getting a lot of San Francisco players in my lineups.
I totally agree. And I'm getting the same thing with the builder this morning too. And it's actually the stack that gives you the most 3x1s, most reasonable 3x1s. And a lot of that has to do with the cheap piece of Jeff Wilson, which we don't really have a ton of in other game stacks. So I agree. I think the San Francisco side's a very, very good play in high risk contests.
Definitely. Danny says, for MME, considering how popular Brady, Allen, and Mahomes are, I set a rule to force an underperforming wide receiver and a low-owned player into those lineups. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's good in general, right, to have some kind of rule like that, at least forcing one low-owned player. I mean, just looking at projected ownership, and we normally get a pretty big change from Saturday to Sunday once we get all the final inputs. But it looks like Taysom and Cam Newton are going to be the most popular quarterbacks. A lot of people are going to run naked Taysom, naked Cam. We've seen it before. And Allen and Brady and Mahomes will be popular, but as we alluded to earlier, they're expensive stacks. And so it kind of limits what you can do with the rest of your lineup. And on a week where there's not a ton of value, I don't know if they'll be that popular. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, but I do like your idea just in general because we saw last week, right, how many high-owned players were in the winning lineups. That's a rare occasion. You generally want, 1 or 2 at least low-owned, sub 10% players. So I do like that from that angle.
I will just say Naked Taysom's going to be my next horse name on Zed Run. Yeah. But yeah, talking about some games. We have a question here from Ed. Said, "What's up, boys? Final week of best ball, and half my team is on a bye. Sitting 20 points out of round 2 spot. Are we playing stud wide receivers or stud running backs this week? And T. Higgins is going to break the slate."
Okay. Very stream of consciousness there from Ed. What's up, Ed? Thanks for joining. Good luck in your best ball. It's rough when you're on bye in week 14. That's freaking crazy. So hope you can somehow sneak into that spot. And I think stud running backs to play this week, Moose. We don't really have a ton of stud receivers, right? The highest priced receiver, at least on DraftKings, is Tyreek Hill at 8,500, which with no Cooper Kupp, no Devontae Adams, that changes things some. And to me, Austin Eckler and Alvin Kamara are just in absolute smash spots at the running back position, and they're not that expensive either compared to when McCaffrey's been on the slate and Jonathan Taylor. So I mean, Eckler's 8,300, Kamara's 7,900, very affordable. I think we should absolutely hammer those guys.
Yeah, you talked about Eckler. I think we should probably talk about that situation just a little bit with the Chargers. Looking at where is it? I'm just looking at DraftKings ownership for wide receivers. Mike Williams projected to be the highest owned wide receiver at 21%. Jalen Gooden at 15%. So it looks like that's going to be an expensive side or popular side, not necessarily an expensive side. What's your thoughts on that side?
Yeah, so Keenan's out, right, with COVID. It's Ian Rappaport just reported that Mike Williams likely to be cleared, a bunch of negative tests in a row, so he's good to go. And yeah, so Mike Williams naturally as the wide receiver one is super underpriced. Guyton, we do have a sample size with Allen out of the lineup last year, and both Williams and Guyton saw significant target bumps. Guyton's still more of a deep threat type of guy, so I get it. I'd be more willing to fade him in tournaments than I would Mike Williams, just because Mike Williams is an alpha type receiver. But we'll also see heavier passing out of the backfield and just running with Austin Eckler, which is why he tops the model this week without Allen. I mean, we talked about it last week, Moose, right? When a stud is out of the lineup like Keenan Allen, it's not necessarily one person comes in and takes all that. Really, most of his production is distributed evenly amongst other players. And what that really does is bump up those secondary options like Eckler, like Mike Williams, to being really, really good plays.
Yeah, you pretty much hit that there on the spot. Dot Bet says, what's your thoughts on Seattle 2-0 or 3-0 stacks for high risk?
In theory, I like it, right? Like Russ against Houston, DK Metcalf underperforming wide receiver this week. Lockett has been in sync with Russ. I just have a really shitty feeling that, especially after some comments again this week, that Pete Carroll's talking about this like magic number of rush attempts plus pass attempts or something. I don't know. I mean, no idea what he's talking about. But I just have a feeling that they're going to run with Alex Collins, run with Rashad Penny, DJ Dallas, whatever other running back they can find off the street. Just keep running the ball, limit passing attempts, which, again, they can be super efficient and get there. I feel like we're going to get Pete Carroll if we try to do that.
Yeah, it's rough because it always seems like you pick Metcalf, Lockett goes off. You pick Lockett, Metcalf goes off. Yeah. I probably like the 2-0 better in that sense. Just pick Russ, either Metcalf or Lockett, and run with that one.
And save yourself some headaches. Make the same exact lineup and just swap Lockett and Metcalf. That way, if one goes off, you have a lineup that you like.
Definitely. Ed says Byron Pringle is the quintessential Curtis Samuel this week. And Brian, I brought this point up in the Occupy staff chat, but I wanted to bring it up here. Byron Pringle projected to not have that much of a target share. It's usually dominated by Hill and Kelsey. So in a stack like this where you have a player who's cheap, pretty decent, but doesn't get the target share that could potentially get you there, what's your thought process on that, or particularly Byron Pringle?
I know it's tough, right? Like, so that it makes sense, right? It makes sense. So there's two guys like that this week. There's Byron Pringle, who's 3,200 on DraftKings, and then out of nowhere, Brashad Perriman for Tampa Bay, who ran 47 routes, completely overtook Tyler Johnson as the wide receiver 3 in Tampa Bay's offense. So both those guys, if we're looking for Curtis Samuel 3-1 pieces, those are the guys that you're going to play, because Pringle last month or so has moved into that wide receiver 2 role for Kansas City. Perriman over the last week has turned into the wide receiver 3 for Tampa. So again, if these games shoot out, if the scoring environment's higher than we expect, there's a chance these guys score 15 points. Is that enough to get there in high-risk contests? Maybe. But again, like you said, we can't reasonably project more than 5 targets for these guys. So for the largest contests, it's really tough. It's really, really tough. I would prefer to have some sort of cheaper player that could be a wide receiver 2 or secondary option as opposed to that 3rd or 4th option.
That makes sense. I can see that. Yeah. one of my slate groups, I actually have a really tight condensed player pool. I don't have Pringle. I'm doing a lot more 2x1 Kansas City stacks. It's tough. You look at it and like, this is good, and you look at it, it's like, well, if Pringle goes off instead of Hill, but this isn't Showdown, so you can't really accurately root for that. It's tough. I'll say for someone like that, it's very, very tough. I don't hate if someone does it, but it's rough.
Right. I agree. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. And again, if I'm willing to play 2-1 stacks this week, I mean, I think that's probably the move.
Yeah. Let's see here. It says all day AP for 2 Vulture touchdowns. I didn't even know he was
unless he can do it on his couch, he's out this week. So even he can't do it this week.
Yeah. Dalton and Brian Edwards or Zay Jones for DraftKings high risk.
Yeah, so it's got to be Zay Jones. Brian Edwards is just cardio king out there, just running routes but not getting targets, whereas Zay Jones has been getting targets. He's been on the underperforming list last couple of weeks, and I actually don't feel as bad about it, right? Obviously, I was a few points away from a live final ticket last week if Zay Jones catches one of those, either the touchdown or one of the deep passes. He's getting targets, and he's getting valuable targets. So I prefer Zay Jones, who stepped in when Ruggs left the team, and has drawn targets. And again, we know that drawing targets generally is a reliable indicator of getting more targets in the future. So I think I'll go with Zay Jones.
Definitely. .bet says Javonte get more workload, or does Gordon split it?
That's a good question. So Gordon's going to be back this week, and obviously anyone who's played fantasy, studied the draft, whatever, was just clamoring for Javonte Williams to get more work. Goes out against Kansas City, just absolutely smashes the slate. And now Gordon's going to come back, and they're going to feed him the ball too. So I think Williams might have earned a little bit more of work, and a couple of beat reporters are kind of hinting that way too. But Gordon's still going to get his. However, Moose, the thing here is the Lions have a 15-point team total. Literally everyone's out on their team. Denver's 11-point favorites. There's enough for both guys to get it, and I think at their prices, especially Williams, who has the opportunity to get more, it's still a really good play.
Yeah, you pretty much hit that on the head. I don't really have much else to add to that. Ken says, any interest in the Jets wide receivers, Crowder or Cole?
Yeah, I have some slight interest. I think I'll add him to the player pool. So Elijah Moore, probably, I don't think he's questionable. I think he's more doubtful than anything. Corey Davis out for the year, placed on injured reserve. So it's really those two guys at the top. And I think, and again, not to get into wide receiver, cornerback matchups or whatever, but there's a chance that Keelan Cole is just glued to Marshawn Lattimore on the outside, and the Jets don't even try to throw his way, which means more Crowder. So I think I would lean Crowder, but both guys are cheap, and Cole especially. If you're playing all these expensive stacks, you need some salary saving somewhere. I think that's a good place to look.
Okay, cool. Let's see here. Ed says Kelsey destroys. Let's see. Yeah, I think we kind of already answered that one about Zay.
Yep.
Cool. So we go back to the stacks. The next stack is Buffalo at Tampa Bay. 53.5 point total. Quite a bit of players play from this game. It should be a pass-heavy, fantasy-friendly game in Week 14. Josh Allen is the top-ranked quarterback in the Occupy model, and is facing a Bucs defense that's far easier to pass against than run. I expect Tom Brady and the Bucs to continue passing at the rate in the league, while they hope to hold serve at home, as Chris wrote. If Josh Allen can throw in like 50-mile-an-hour gusts very easily, I'm sure he could throw just as well without any wind. So I like the side as well.
There's a legit chance they don't run the ball a single time in this game, right? They were their hands were tied in the Monday night game, which shout out to the fantasy gods, very good game for us. So they had to run the ball more just by nature of the wind. They couldn't throw 50 times in a fucking hurricane. So I think they're a smart team, right? You can't run on Tampa.
Yeah. They're
a pass-heavy team. And this all adds up to Josh Allen just dropping back and throwing like 60 times. So it gives him just a ridiculously high ceiling. And I think you have to. To me, I prefer that side a little bit just because I think it'll be a little bit lower owned than the Tampa Bay side. But either way, I really like both sides in this game. And you can 2x1 it, but you really got to find, 3x1 it, but you got to find some cheap options outside because really aren't that many cheap options in this game. Because even we look for that 5K mark for cheap players for the Curtis Samuel piece. Mm-hmm. Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley, they're right around that mark, right? So they just barely qualify. But when Josh Allen's, 7,800, that makes the whole stack super expensive. So It's tough. It's definitely tough, but I think you got to get pieces of this game for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking here. Outside of Perriman, I mean, do you really want to jam in Gabriel Davis at 3,500? Probably
No,
not. No.
no.
No. What's your Saquon exposure this week?
I haven't finished yet, but I'll have a decent amount, I think. I haven't played him recently, but I'm actually just looking now to see what I did on DraftKings, my preliminary runs. Yeah, so we're expecting 10 to 11% from the field. We'll see if that changes over the next 24 hours. But I'll have at least that, I think, against a team that just lets you run against them. So I'll definitely play some Barkley.
Nice. R&R says my favorite stack is 49ers versus the Bengals. There we go, R&R.
There we go.
Yes. Hawk Dark says Allen, Diggs, Knox running back with Fournette.
Yeah, so if you do that, right, which I think is in a vacuum without any salary considerations is a fantastic 3x1 stack. But Knox just barely qualifies. He's actually 5K on DraftKings, 6K on FanDuel, right? There's no cheap pieces in that stack, and the rest of your lineup's going to be extremely compromised. But if Allen throws 60 times, that might be optimal. So
yeah, definitely. And then the last stack we talked about here is the Dallas and Washington game. Division game, 48.5 point total. And Washington's allowing the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. And Dallas defense allows a lot of production to opposing offenses as well. Dak is the third highest ranked quarterback in the Occupy model. Brian, what's your thoughts on this game?
So the first thing I noticed when I was running, I hand selected this game for the builder just to see what was possible. Most of the highest projected stacks were Washington stacks because of the affordability and what it allowed you to do. Mm-hmm. And the big thing here, right? Like, so a lot of people might not be interested in playing Washington because the volume's been down. They've been on a 5-game win streak, and they've helped us in our pick'em pool moves tremendously over the last 5 weeks. But from a fantasy standpoint, the fact that they're winning and actually controlling games means that they're running as much as they want, and they'd rather run the ball than pass the ball. I mean, they have more rush attempts than pass attempts in their last game. So if Dallas scores like we expect, and that's what you need from a game stack anyways, you need both sides to score. If Dallas scores like they can, that means Washington will undoubtedly have to pass more than they've had in the last month. So that just leads to elevated ceilings at depressed price tags for especially the Washington side in this game.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough because the pieces are there for Washington, but the way that they've been playing these last 5 games you just talked about doesn't get you there in high-risk, large-field contests. So I actually crossed the Washington side out. I do have some bringbacks in some ways, but I don't know. I just can't bring myself to pull the trigger on the Washington stack side. I've been burned a couple times in the last couple weeks. I just don't see how they get there playing the way they play. Especially you have a tough divisional game. I don't know.
I think it's fair. It's a fair criticism. I totally get it. And to me, I think this is another side that you can 2x1 if you want because it's relatively cheap and Heineke can run. The more they have to pass, the more he runs. So I think that can certainly help you out. And the nice thing is they do have cheap pieces, right? Like so Logan Thomas is out. Ricky Seals-Jones backs at tight end. He's going to have a full complement of snaps. Mm-hmm. So I think it's there are ways to play it, and then we have to monitor Tony Pollard on the other side because if he's out, Zeke's going to get almost every carry and touch, and he'll climb up the running back rankings as well.
Yeah, I do think this is something that you would have to wait to build on to see if Pollard's if Pollard's out, then you definitely jam in Zeke there. Yeah, Washington is cheap, and I'm looking at one thing here really quick. Where is he? Yeah, I know John Bates had 3 catches, 4 targets last week. Does he scare you at all in terms of taking opportunities away in that tight end role?
I don't think so. Just because we'll have to. I haven't read the reports as of yesterday for Ricky Seals-Jones, but basically, if someone's healthy and they're atop the depth chart, they get like all the routes. And Ricky Seals-Jones didn't play last week, so when Logan Thomas left, it was the John Bates show, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm not too worried about it. I think Ricky Seals-Jones is the guy this week.
Nice. Ed says, can we really justify naked Taysom with a fully healthy Kamara back?
No, I mean in low risk contests, sure, but you'll never hear us justify a naked quarterback in tournaments.
It would have to be like 1930s NFL DFS.
Yes, a wing T offense style.
Yeah. Brian says, 3,000 subscribers. Congrats. Thank you. We couldn't have made it here without all of you 3,000 people who subscribed. So thank you all.
Appreciate you all. Thank you, Brian, and thank to everyone who has subscribed. We're going to do a giveaway. We'll probably announce it around Christmas time, maybe the new year, what the giveaway will be. And yeah, we're on the road to 4K and higher. So again, thanks to everyone.
We need to hit. It's funny. I always look. You see people who do like the YouTube. It's like unboxing for the awards. And I was like, oh, I think it's 10,000 for it. And it's like, no, 10,000. You get like an email saying congrats from YouTube. And,
well, we'll unbox the email then when we get 10,000.
And then it's like, yeah, you need 100,000 for the fancy plaque. And I was like, oh, that's you need a lot of subscribers for that.
Just 97,000 more of you need to subscribe.
Definitely. Ed says, who's the worst good play tomorrow?
Who did I say last week? Oh, I said Alexander Madison, right? And I think that turned out okay. He did fine. He didn't make the optimal lineup, but he did fine. The worst good play. All right, give me a second here. Moose, if you want to talk.
I was gonna say I have mine.
Oh, who's that?
Which I'm playing that you probably shouldn't. Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mentioned this in the staff chat.
That's the best. That's the best worst play, not the worst best play, right?
Oh, best. Reading is very hard for me. Let's see. All right, so while we're doing that, Kansas, how much do you like Julio Jones coming back from IR?
I think you gotta like it against Jacksonville. I'm sure he'll end up, 15-20%, but yeah, that's a spot you gotta like. I think without AJ Brown. Mm-hmm. So I like him. I like him pretty significantly, I'll say.
I'll actually pull this one out for you, Brian, for the worst good play tomorrow. What do you think about Fournette? In the sense that we're banking on that game to be very pass heavy. Fournette's actually pretty good. Apparently just scores every touchdown in the goal line. But we're banking on variance not going his way.
I'm never going to call Fournette the worst best play ever again. So he's forever a great play. So I'm not going to say anything. Honestly, the worst best play is probably Guyton, right?
Yeah.
3,400 receiver. Obviously cheap, right? But a career rotational guy. 15% plus, a game they couldn't run the ball a ton, could use Mike Williams, Austin Eckler heavily. Guyton is probably the best or the worst best play just based on ownership.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah. Brian says, have you guys talked about Shuba yet? Motto has Abdullah above him.
Yeah, so here's the thing, right? In recent weeks, Abdullah, since he joined the club, has been taking passing work away. He even got some passing work when McCaffrey was in there. And it was pretty clear that when McCaffrey was out, that Abdullah was taking most of the passing game work from Shuba Hubbard. And they've talked up Abdullah. So, I know they fired the offensive coordinator, said they want to run the ball more. That would generally favor Shuba Hubbard. But they're already, relatively high in the league in rush attempts. So the model picks up on Abdullah's pass-catching nature, and that's why it has him ranked above Shuba.
Makes sense. Cool. So we have just a couple minutes left before we get up out of here. I do want to talk about the last other stacks that Chris wrote up. And Brian, if you have any thoughts on them. LAC at NYG. I don't know why I didn't say the team names, but Brian, any opinions on that?
I mean, this feels like a game where just like the Chargers control it. The Giants have actually been pretty good on defense. They've only allowed more than 20-something points once in the last 7 games or something. Wow. I have a feeling that the Chargers just run the ball a ton, dink and dunk to a victory. So I'm not a huge fan of it. I get it from the Chargers side. I just feel like we just get the rug pulled out from under us if we try to play the Chargers.
Yeah. And then Baltimore, Cleveland.
Oof. I like a lot of options in this game, but I think they're cheaper, and we don't necessarily have to play the quarterbacks with them. But, again, we haven't seen it recently from Lamar, but we know what he can do to a slate, so I get it.
Yep, definitely. So let's knock out these last couple questions here. Ed has a lot of players in that pool, which is I don't hate it. Hog Draft is double tight end like Hooper and Knox. I don't like it.
No. I think we'll see elevated double tight end ownership as people try to jam in those stacks. In fact, we might even see the most duplicated lineup on Tuesday's $1 Million Mission as a double tight end lineup because of this phenomenon. But again, neither one of those guys are going to lead their team in targets or catches or yards, so that's not the double tight end that you want to go with.
Yeah. CO says, who's the best slot receiver?
Like in the league, period, or like the best slot receiver play tomorrow?
Let's do best slot receiver for DFS tomorrow.
God, best slot receiver for DFS.
It's not bad. That
My
for the
mind
model.
can, dude, I don't even know.
Hold on. I think I might be able to.
Probably Chris Godwin, I would guess.
All right.
Godwin
Awesome.
or
I'll go with him. Dot bet says wide receiver or flex for high risk and 20 max.
good question. I'm finding myself with more running backs this week, but that's also a result of me having not really trying to pare down my player pool as much. Lower total games this week, so I think you can get away with running back. It's probably an even mix this week. It's not like last week. I think it was last week where we saw a very clear edge in playing running back. I don't see a very clear edge this week, which generally means it's probably smart to play receiver.
Definitely. And then last question here: James Robinson this week.
Man, that whole shit show. So Urban Meyer came out and said he has no idea. He doesn't deal with the running back rotations. That's up to the running back coach. He doesn't know why James Robinson didn't play. He has no idea why James Robinson, who was completely hurt, was getting carries down 30 points in the fourth quarter. He just didn't know. And then we get the report today that Urban Meyer ordered the benching of James Robinson in the game. So who the hell knows what's going to happen, right? Trevor Lawrence wants him to play more. Robinson wants to play more, obviously. He's still banged up. I don't know, man. Just point blank, I don't fucking trust that organization. So I'm not going to play James Robinson.
Yeah, what a clusterfuck of an organization.
Dude, just a disaster.
Yeah. Cool. So, Brian, before we get up out of here, any last thoughts, comments, concerns you want to talk about before I get us out of here?
I'll just say, high risk contest, it seemed like a better 2-1 week. We're going to mega enjoy it and play a little bit of all kinds of stacks. Shout out to Megan Jolie, who's won 2 millis in the past 2 years. And we're going to follow her lead and play some 3-1s, obviously, but then mix in some 2-1s this week and see what we can do some damage.
Yes. Hashtag do damage. That's an old phrase. If you get it, if you know, you know. But yeah, so until next time, I'm Moose and he's Brian. We're from OccupyFantasy.com. If you have any more questions, go ahead and ask in the Discord, OccupyFantasy.com/Discord. Chris will be live tomorrow on Twitter Live, so make sure you follow us over there to be notified of when he goes live. We'll be back live on YouTube on Tuesday, where we discuss Brian's $1 million mission. We review his lineups. But until all then, have a good one.